Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons and why the Dungeons & Dragons movie failed in 2000, okay? The 2000 Dungeons & Dragons film, why it failed. All right, so today I bring forward to you a new understanding that I have come to on why the Dungeons & Dragons film, the 2000 Dungeons & Dragons film, failed, okay? And I think this is unique. I've never heard anyone talk about this before. And I think it really might be part of the reason why it failed in 2000 and why it's struggling today, okay? So the Dungeons & Dragons movie is kind of the holy grail for the tabletop role-playing game industry, certainly for the Dungeons & Dragons fans. We all desperately want a Dungeons & Dragons movie. And we want this for some really specific reasons, right? So one of the things that's awesome about Hollywood, one of the things that Hollywood accomplishes is Hollywood is able to, when Hollywood makes a blockbuster film, whatever the content is, immediately becomes mainstream, right? Or it is launched even briefly or more prominently into the mainstream. And when something is brought into the mainstream, whatever topic is brought into the mainstream grows. There's money that is attached to it. There's products and, all kinds of things. It's good for everybody, that is even remotely related to that content that's been brought forward into the mainstream. So it's really important. Like if we, if a Dungeons & Dragons movie is ever successful, if we have a blockbuster that makes $1 billion or $2 billion or shatters the roof of the global box office and is the first film to make $3 billion, which I think is absolutely possible, okay? Then all of our worlds change, right? Every single Dungeons & Dragons dungeon master and player becomes an expert on a topic that a lot of people care about, right? Because a movie would launch Dungeons & Dragons much for a successful blockbuster would launch Dungeons & Dragons farther into the mainstream. Right now, I really don't think Dungeons & Dragons is mainstream at all today. It's still a niche product. Most people really don't understand what Dungeons & Dragons is, even today, and I think most people have never played Dungeons & Dragons. I mean, that's just a fact, right? So, so we're really, as much as we'd like to be mainstream, as much as there are indications that, that aspects of Dungeons & Dragons are mainstream, overall Dungeons & Dragons is not mainstream, okay? So let's talk about the 2002 movie, okay? The 2000 Dungeons & Dragons movie made $33 million. It was a critical and commercial failure, okay? And I don't need to defend that. You'll find it in a million news sources, right? And the film is widely mocked today, okay? And you would be hard-pressed to find a single Dungeons & Dragons player or Dungeon Master that would defend it as a good film unequivocally, all right? Okay. Or without couching or some other weird, like, ironically or whatever, right? Okay, just say, yeah, that's a great movie. Like, you're just not going to find somebody, okay? All right. So, here is the new understanding. This is why the 2000 Dungeons & Dragons movie failed. The 2000 Dungeons & Dragons movie did not fail because it was a bad movie, because it was poorly written, because its creators did not respect the source material, because it didn't gather to itself top-tier talent, because it wasn't effectively marketed, right? None of those reasons are the reason that the Dungeons & Dragons 2000 film failed. The Dungeons & Dragons 2000 film failed because every single game movie that has ever been created has failed. The genre of game films does not exist. All right? That's a bold statement, and now I'm going to back it up with evidence. All right. You can see the history of game movies in 4 films, okay? Now, right out of the gate, I'm going to pull some things off the board, okay? When I talk about game movie, I talk about a movie based on a real game, okay? Sports movies are not included in this because they're sports, right? They're not They're an aspect of there's a game aspect to those, but they're primarily sports, and sports movies are their own genre, okay? They're not part of the game movie genre, okay? Now, let's talk about the game movie genre. You can see the history of the game movie genre in 4 films, okay? This is all my evidence from my research. I invite correction. Let me know if you found research that is counter to what I'm presenting here. Okay, let's go through them. Movie number 1, Clue, 1985. It is the first movie ever created on a tabletop game, created about a real tabletop game. It comes out in 1985. It makes $14 million. It is a critical and commercial failure. It enjoys it is a cult favorite today. The film is a cult favorite today. That status does nothing for the creators back in 1985, right? It's nice to have, but it's not why anybody builds a movie to become a cult classic. Excuse me. So Clue is the first failure in the game movie among game movies, the game movie category. Right now, game movies are a category; they are not a genre, and I'll explain why I say that. All right, the second game movie is Dungeons and Dragons in 2000. It makes $33 million. It is a critical and commercial failure. Okay, in 2012, you get the next tabletop game movie. Right, it is Battleship. And it makes $303 million. It is a critical and commercial failure. Now, how is a movie that made $303 million a failure? Well, it was made to be a blockbuster. It was made to make $500 million. It was made to make $1 billion. At that level, most of the movies want to triple their budget. That is the new level of success for blockbuster films. Okay, it did not triple its budget. It was a critical and commercial failure. The next movie in the game movie category is, and this one's a special one, we'll talk about it, is Warcraft. It comes out in 2016 and it makes $433 million. Warcraft was based off the World of Warcraft MMO by Blizzard. It is the video game movie that has grossed the highest in the history of video game movies. Now, Dungeons & Dragons is not a video game, Battleship is not a video game, and Clue is not a video game. So why am I including it here, right? Well, the reason why is it is a game, right? You could treat it separately, but we don't need to, right? And the reason why is Warcraft made 30, because it matches the pattern I found. Every game movie ever made has failed. Every single one, okay? Not just Dungeons & Dragons, right? So, let's talk about it. Warcraft made $433 million. You're like, that's close to $500 million. The budget was close to $250 million. The budget was very, very high if you include everything, right? It did not triple its budget. The other thing is it was targeted to be a blockbuster. And if you think I'm wrong that it was a commercial failure, right? I'm not sure it was actually a critical failure. Like, the critics didn't pan it completely. But, and many people like that film. But it did not commercially succeed, right? And the reason why is no one makes a blockbuster to make their money back or make a little bit more. And that's what Warcraft did. It was not the commercial goal of anyone involved with the project. They wanted $500 million to $1 billion. The new mark for a blockbuster is $2 billion. That is huge. That has been set by Disney. They've done it multiple times, and it is really, and so if you have a blockbuster film, something that was clearly aimed to be a blockbuster, and you come in under $500 million, that is a commercial failure, okay? Another proof of this is the Mad Max Fury Road movie, okay? And both Mad Max Fury Road and Warcraft made over $400 million, and absolutely no one is talking about a sequel because those investors didn't make those movies to make a little money back, okay? So, Warcraft is the most is the highest grossing video game movie ever, and it is not commercially successful. Every single video game movie ever made has failed. Every single one, right? And those movies have tons and tons and tons of investment, right? And they already have a built-in audience, and they still fail, right? Now, I can already feel it in the comments section. U-Bowl, he's the reason. He was the reason in the 90s, right? Maybe in the early 2000s. He's no longer the reason. U-Bowl is no longer an excuse for why video game movies fail, right? But video game movies have never, ever, ever been successful, right? And so, if you look at the entirety of the game movie category, you realize the genre does not exist, right? All we have are movies that have been attempted to be created about games, and every single one has failed. And there's well over 100 of them, if you include video game movies, right? And not a single one of them has ever succeeded, which means that creating a successful Dungeons & Dragons movie is a far more larger and more daunting task than any of us ever thought it was. And what it really means is that in order to make it, right, to make a successful Dungeons & Dragons movie, you must create the game movie genre, right? The action movie genre has successes. The romance movie genre has successes, right? The horror movie genre has successes. The game movie genre does not have a single success, which means in order to succeed, not only must Dungeons & Dragons be an incredible Dungeons & Dragons movie, it actually has to accomplish something that every single video game movie ever done has failed to do, which has become a critical and commercial success. Right? And so that is the issue. Now, this is terrible, sad news, and I'm sorry to bring it to you. The only reason I bring it to you today is it is a new understanding that I have reached, right? And just as a quick note, I'll explain where the Dungeons & Dragons movie is today. Dungeons & Dragons movie came out in 2000. It was a critical and commercial failure. It made $33 million back in 2000. For 16 years, nobody even talked about a Dungeons & Dragons movie. In 2016, a Dungeons & Dragons movie was announced, and at that time, there were actors attached, there was a script attached, and there was a studio attached. All of those have changed since 2016. And the video game movie, I believe, is connected to Paramount. It is aiming toward a 2021 release. And both the script and the director are currently up in the air, right? And Paramount is struggling. It just had its Star Trek series of films crack in half and lost Hemsworth and Chris Pine. And Paramount itself is not doing great, right? So right now, the Dungeons & Dragons film is not doing great by the metrics that I see. In my opinion, the Dungeons & Dragons movie is not on track to succeed in 2021. I have eternal hope, but I also am a pragmatist, and I'm just not seeing the clues that this is going to stop. So here's the thing, and the reason I'm making this today is to tell you, as part of the TRPG community, as part of the Dungeons & Dragons community, the creating a Dungeons & Dragons film is going to be incredibly difficult, because we always knew it would be incredibly difficult to make a Dungeons & Dragons movie. I don't think what we ever knew before was that what we're really doing is we are trying to create an entire genre, the game movie genre, because currently it's simply a category, because every time anyone has ever attempted to create a movie based on a real game, that attempt has failed, right? And video games, which have far more money, far more momentum than any board game currently, has also failed at this task. So it's sorry to kind of end on a sad note, but we really need to think about it, right? And we should, and then we should make it clear when somebody's trying to make a movie, in our opinions, that they need to not only make, that the creators, we need to make sure they know in the comments, and when we go see their panel at Comic-Con, right, that they're not just making a good Dungeons and Dragons movie. They actually are going to be they need to make the first successful game genre movie, which has never been done in the history of film, right? And so we wish them our best, and we give them as much support as we can, and we hope for the best, all right? I'm really curious what you think on this topic, and please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you.